Welcome to the tutorial Importing and Working with a 3D Model in Harmony. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to import a 3D model, manipulate it, and then eventually render it in Harmony. So to begin, let's go to the File menu here at the top and select File, Import, 3D Models. So the first option in the Import 3D Models dialog box is to browse and search for a file. So I'm going to click on the Browse button, and it brings up a browser window. So if you remember from the previous tutorial, because we installed the Maya to OSB plugin, we were able to select the export option TB 3D Export, which exports a .osb file. And if you remember, I also saved this pirateship.osb file in this 3D ships folder. So let's select that file and then click on the Open button. The next options you have are the layer options. So you can either create a layer with the name of your 3D object, so in this case it's Pirate Ship 13, or you can create layers based on file names, and this choice is usually used for multiple selections. So if I selected 4 or 5 different .osb files, or you can add your 3D model to an existing layer. And if you make the selection from the drop down, I believe the only choice is drawing, which means that your 3D object would be placed on a vector drawing layer. However, because the 3D model is not necessarily compatible with the vector format, it would be encapsulated in a symbol. So let's go back to the first choice and then click on OK. And as you can see, our pirate ship has been imported into our scene. It's a little bit difficult to see in the camera view, so let me bring up the perspective view. And right now we're currently at exactly the same angle, so let me zoom out a little bit. And then let's use Control-Alt to rotate the ship so you can see it from a different angle. And then spacebar just to bring the view down a bit. So as you can see, the pirate ship has been imported with all of its textures and all the proper lighting. That's why we can see all these shadows, just as we saw it in Maya. The only difference is that it's actually quite large for this Harmony scene, but we'll take care of that in just a minute. So let's just take a look at the network view first. So here's our Pirate Ship 13 module, and as you can see, it's blue and it looks pretty much like any other module in the network view. For the other module that represents this drawing layer right here, we can see that it has TVG in brackets beside it, whereas the Pirate Ship has OSB in brackets beside it. So that at least gives us an indication of what the file type is for that specific module. However, as I mentioned, you can treat this module in almost exactly the same way as you would treat any other module in the network view. For example, we can also add a peg to it. So let's try doing that. I'm just going to click on this down arrow to bring up the module library. And from the module library, I'm going to select a peg and drop it into the network view and then connect it to the top of the pirate ship. There is one more step, however, that you need to do in order to manipulate this 3D object in 3D space in Harmony, and that's to enable the 3D option for its module or layer. So to do this, you could either double click on this layer in the timeline view, or you can click on this yellow box belonging to the 3D object module. And so this is the option that we need to enable right here, Enable 3D. So I'm just going to check that and then click Close. And you might not see any visible change, but now whenever you make a transformation, it won't treat this object like it's being moved on a 2D plane. It'll actually allow you to move it in a 3D plane. So now in order to move the pirate ship in various different ways, such as scaling, rotating, and translating, we need both the advanced animation toolbar as well as 2 other views to help us see how we're moving our 3D object. So in order to bring up the advanced animation toolbar, we're going to go to the top menu, select Windows, Toolbars, Advanced Animation, and here it is right here. And then I'm going to bring up 2 more views, and that's the side and the top view. So I'm going to click on this down arrow here and select side. And in fact, I think I'm going to make space for these 2 views in my interface. So now the side view exists as its own window. And I'm also going to bring up the top view. So the first tool I'd like to show you is the Translate tool, and it's this one right here. So this allows you to move your 3D object either up or down, towards the left or the right, or backwards or forwards. So what we recommend for either animating or just repositioning is to only drag your 3D object along one axis at a time. So for example, if I want to move my pirate ship up and down, I would select this green arrow, and you can tell that it's selected because it's now highlighted in pink, and then pull up or pull down. And in this way, my pirate ship is locked to this axis. I can't, even if I want to, move it from side to side. And this is recommended so that you don't get lost in terms of where your object is in relation to the animation plane. So once again, I can select another arrow and also drag it along that path just to show you, and then select the last arrow, the blue arrow, that lets you move back and forth in space. And it might be a bit more obvious in the top view if I zoomed out a bit. I'm going to use the number 1 to zoom out. And you can once again also do it from the top view. I've selected this blue arrow, and I can move back and forth. The next tool in the Advanced Animation toolbar is the Rotate tool. So I'm going to select that. And the one thing that I forgot to do is uncheck the Animate mode. So I've accidentally created some keyframes here. So what I'm going to do is actually use Control Z to undo until I get rid of those keyframes. Okay, there we go. Then I'm going to turn off the Animate mode. So the Animate mode, as most of you already know, makes a temporary record of translations, rotations, scaling on a keyframe. So if we want to actually position or create the first position for our ship, or like its natural state, we don't want the Animate mode on, or else it will just be a temporary keyframed position. So I think the reason that we don't see the 3D manipulators for the Rotate tool here is because maybe the peg is selected and not the ship. Let me select the ship, and there we go. So now these are the manipulators you should see. You shouldn't see a single circle, you should see 3 rings. You might not be able to tell that these are 3 separate rings, but in fact they are. We have this red ring here, we have this blue ring, and we have the green ring, which looks like a line right now. And if you hover your cursor over any of these rings, you actually get the axis that it's rotating on. So this one's rotating on the Z axis, and if we turn, you can see the rotation is locked to that Z axis. And once again, as I mentioned before, we do recommend that you make rotations along a specific axis whenever you can. So it's the same for this. So I guess I didn't select it properly, so now I'm doing sort of a free transform. I'm actually probably grabbed somewhere on this sphere. So let's undo that and try that again. Let's actually grab the red ring, and now I'm locked to that ring. Even if I want to move from side to side, I really can't. And the third tool that you can use from the Advanced Animation toolbar is the Scale tool. This is the one that we're looking for because we'd like to shrink our ship down a little bit. In this camera view, we can see in relation to the camera cone, our 3D ship is quite large. So I don't know if this is the best way to view this box. It doesn't look... There we go. It doesn't look like a proper cube. Now you can see that this is a cube, and that if you want to scale in any one direction, you can select one of these points on either of the faces to scale disproportionately. So if I want to scale this way, so that's either a stretch or a squash, I would select that green square. However, if I'd like to scale proportionally, I can grab one of the corners and hold down Shift and then actually scale proportionally. And let's do that now and make our ship more in proportion to what it should be for animation. So here we can see it's quite a bit smaller now. I can zoom in using the number 2. I can go back to the Translate tool and, drag it into view. And the last tool that you can use for manipulating your ship is actually the Transform tool here. And because we have the 3D enabled, it gives us all 3 of the manipulators that we saw from the Advanced Animation toolbar, and that's Translate, Rotate, and Scale. And we can see them here. And once again, even though you have all 3 available in this one tool, it's a good idea just to lock your movements to one specific axis. Okay, so now let's talk about rendering. And for this, I'm going to go back to the camera view. So say we're at a position where we'd like to either make an export, and in which case we'd need to render this 3D object along with the rest of the elements in our scene, or we'd simply like to view this in the render view, so with all the proper shading and lighting and effects. Well, what we need to do then is do a little bit more system setup. And that's because, as I've mentioned before, the rendering is actually done by the Maya soft renderer. So in order to set up the system, we need to establish some environment variables as well as set up the network view properly. So the first thing we need to do is copy the original Maya binary file along with all of its corresponding textures into the elements folder for this module or for this layer, this pirate ship layer or module. So let's minimize our Harmony window. And then let's go over to this folder here on my desktop called Tutorial Material. I'm going to double click on that to open it. And then inside we can see the scene folder for our Harmony scene. So that's the Import 3D folder. If we go back to Harmony, you can see here at the top of the window, it says Import 3D. So that's how we know what the name of our scene is. So here we see the executable file for our scene, but along with that, there are a bunch of associated folders. I'm sure most of you are familiar with them. So the Elements folder is the folder that houses the individual modules or drawing layers, and each module or drawing layer has its own folder with usually TVGs inside if it's a regular Toon Boom Vector graphic drawing element. In this case, our Pirate Ship 13 will have the OSB inside because that's what we imported in order to create that layer or that module. So inside this folder is where we need to now copy the original Maya binary file along with its associated textures. So I'm going to go back up a few levels to the root folder, and I'm going to go into the 3D ship folder. And this is where our original Maya binary file was housed. So I need to copy everything here except for the OSB that we exported. So I'm going to click on the first file, hold down Shift, click on the last file, then Control click the OSB file so that it's deselected. Use Control C to copy all of the files. Go back to the root folder, go back into the Import 3D folder, into the Elements folder, into the Pirate Ship 13 folder where I now see the .osb, and then I'm going to use Control V to paste. So the next thing you have to take a look at is if your .osb file and your .mb file are named the same. So in this case they are, which is perfect. It's Pirate Ship 13-1 for both files. If they are not the same, then you should rename your Maya file, so your Maya binary file, to match the .osb file. So now I'm going to close this folder. And the next step we have to do is we need to assign a port for rendering on Windows. And to do this, we need to go to Computer. So I'm going to go back to the Start menu. So sometimes it's known as Computer if you have a newer version of Windows, or it might be My Computer if you have an older version. And from here, we just need to right-click and select Properties. And from this control panel, so if you went directly into the control panel, you could have gone into System Security and then System, or like I said, you could just right-click right on it and select Properties. So from the System portion of the control panel, here in the margin, we need to select Advanced System Settings. And then down below, we see a button called Environment Variables, and we need to click that. And then here in the System Variable section, we're going to scroll down until we find a variable called path. So it's this one right here, and I'm going to select that and then click on the Edit button. So now what I need to do is deselect the path, and at the very end of the path add a semicolon. Now what I need to do is paste in the entire file path to the bin folder in the Maya program files. So if you remember how we got to that, we actually went to Computer, My Computer. We double-clicked on the hard drive where Maya was installed. We went into the 32-bit folder, so not the one that just says Program Files, but Program Files *x86. We go into Autodesk, Maya 2012, and then Bin. And then if I click here in the address bar, I can actually copy the entire path. And now if I put my cursor back here in the Edit System Variable window, I can use Control V to paste. And so now that entire path is there. So then I'm going to click on the OK button to validate my change. And before I exit this environment variables window, I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to create a new variable. So I'm going to do that by clicking on this new button here under the system variables section. And I'm going to name my variable in all capital letters, Toon Boom underscore mailbox. And then the variable value that I'm going to give it is actually the port number. So once again, this is so that Maya and Harmony can talk to each other in terms of when we need to use the Maya soft renderer to render any 3D objects that we've imported. So the port number I'm going to give it is 7778 and say OK. So if that port number happens to be used already, when you try to perform either a render or go into the render view in Harmony, you'll see an error message. At that time, you should probably contact support@toonboom.com in order for them to help you problem solve and find an available port for your system. So now that we're done that, we're going to click on OK and OK again. And I'm just going to close all the windows here and then go back into Harmony. So there's still one more thing that we need to do, and that's set up our network view. So you may have noticed that in the module library, there's a new tab at the beginning called 3D. So let's click on that tab. And inside are two modules. There's the Render Maya Batch module and the Render Maya Batch Server module. So there's a slight difference between the two. With the Render Maya Batch module, what it does is as it goes through each frame, it renders each frame and opens the renderer and then closes it between every frame. Whereas the Maya Batch Server, what it does, it actually remains open for the duration that it processes all the frames. I'm not sure which render happens to be optimal for which situation, but what you could do is just try both and see which one works best for you. So I'm just going to add the Render Maya Batch into our network view. And then what I'm going to do is hold down Alt and drag it between the Pirate Ship 13 OSB, so this module here, and the composite. I'm actually going to move all of these down so we have a better view of what's going on. There we go. So there are a few things that you need to know about the Maya Batch renderer. First of all, it always does need to be placed between the module that your 3D object is housed in and the composite, and that you need to add a batch renderer for every 3D object in your scene. So for example, if I had two other 3D objects, I could not plug them into the same batch renderer. I would need to add two more of these batch renderer modules into the network view and individually plug each 3D object module into its own batch renderer module and then plug that batch renderer module into the composite. The other thing you need to know is that if you want to add effects to your 3D object, which you can surely do from the module library, you always have to place it after the renderer. So it would go between the renderer and the composite. So now if we go into the camera view, let's click on the render view icon here. Okay, so this is probably either because I have to save or because I have to relaunch. Let's try saving. And then let's go back to the render view mode. Okay, we still don't see anything, so I'm going to relaunch the software and that should solve the problem. Let me close this. Let's relaunch Harmony. Let's open up our import 3D scene. Just going to maximize this. And then I'm going to go back to the render view mode. And there we go. Now we can see our ship fully rendered in the render view mode. It might even help to add a color card so you can see that a bit better. Or maybe not. I think we could see it better without the color card. But anyway, so you have an idea now of how that works and what this is supposed to look like in the render view mode of the camera view. And just to make this a little bit nicer, let's actually rotate that a bit. And let's actually move it down a bit as well. So something like that. And there we go. So now we can see the 3D object at a better angle, make full use of the fact that it is 3D. Anyway, so that's it for the tutorial importing and working with a 3D object in Harmony. And it's also the last video tutorial in the 2D, 3D